Aloha. All right, this is episode, excuse me, 14, and we're talking about round three with chemo that just started. And we'll start really talking through some of the round two side effects. Um, as they always warn you, it's going to get worse as it goes each round. Had a lot of nausea last time, trying to fight through that, kind of gut it out, did not work, had to go to nausea medication just to get through the day and be able to eat. Um, we have increased that and renewed those prescriptions, obviously anticipating the same. Thankfully, initially after you do the oxaliplatin, you get you get prescription nausea meds the day of, and then the 2 days after you hit it hard with 2 pills each morning, and that really helps subside the initial effects of oxaliplatin. And when you go to the capabetacine pills for 14 days, that's just a daily battle, especially when you got to do 2 doses. I'm a max dose, 4 pills at 0.6, 4 at 1800. Heartburn medication that goes with both of those. And then we'll do nausea medication as needed. And then we added another prescription, unfortunately necessary, but actually helpful, with muscle relaxers, specifically with the oxaliplatin. I was having the cramps in round two were a lot worse in my calves specifically, but also in my jaw. And with the muscle relaxers, especially at night, it's helpful to get the calves loose. I don't feel as much impact on my jaw, but it's still pretty crampy today, and you can kind of tell my voice is hoarse from struggling to get fluids in because of the cramping in my jaw and the way the sensitivity to cold. It's just hard to drink and open my mouth all the way, take bites and drink. Straws help if you're finding that. I leave the water and Gatorades and other things out, so it's at least room temperature, which still can be cold the first couple days. And we're adding in a couple different teas in the afternoon, just warm liquids. I like it ice cold or I like it hot, like coffee. I'm not a big tea drinker, but I am trying to introduce that in the afternoon with no caffeine, low caffeine teas, because the coffee was bothering my stomach, the digestive tract specifically. Just to continue to keep fluids moving, using soups. Heather recommended bone broth today with higher protein, and just working that in so I could stay hydrated, especially in that first week when the cramps and the jaw problems and the cold sensitivity are the worst. So it also doesn't drop my immune system. Towards the end of round two, and it was actually post my last capabetacine pills were the morning of Thursday. It was in my week off, which sucked, which made it even more frustrating. Friday, I started feeling bad in the afternoon. Had an initial case of diarrhea. I didn't think too much of it because depending on how I'm eating and where I'm at, usually I have a healthy bowel movement in the morning, and then I'm a wreck come midday with just putting food in there, still trying to find the balance that works. And then I usually have diarrhea. Unfortunately, it got worse. Between noon on Friday and, started Imodium at midnight after I already had diarrhea like 7 times. It was almost 20 times by the time I got to Saturday evening. I tried the Imodium, hit 2 the first time. It was coming so fast that even after taking 1 each time, I was almost to the max dose, which it's only 8 in a 24-hour period. Looking back on it, I probably could have got just as much utility out of shoving them up my backside. But that was frustrating, got me really dehydrated. Amber encouraged me to call the hospital, which I did Friday or Monday. Sorry. They were able to get me in to push fluids. There wasn't a fever, so it was less problematic or risk there. So they were able to push fluids Monday, Tuesday. I had to do some additional blood work. There was concern because in the stool, it wasn't blood, but there was separation between what would be normally even a diarrhea stool and what looked like a lot of mucus. So they were concerned that I had an infection, potentially C. diff or a bacterial imbalance or a parasite. I was isolated at the hospital, so I didn't get anybody else sick when I was taking my fluids as they ran those tests. Thankfully, those came back negative, but there is another test they needed to run because they ruled those out first. A more severe issue that may be developing is enzyme deficiency, which is uncommon, but to be honest, and with it from initial diagnosis to everywhere we've gone, I've always been in the uncommon group. 3% of Caucasian patients develop an enzyme disorder, which is essentially your body is unable to metabolize and process the betazyme, specifically the pills, in a fast enough manner, even with a week off, that it starts to build up to a too toxic of a level. And then once your body hits that enzyme mutation, there's no, you can't fix that piece. The danger was that if that was something separated in my stool, it could have been or likely was the interior lining of my GI tract, digestive tract, whatever you want to call it. So that may be the initial lining. And it was my decision to start round 3. I think at this point it's worth the risk because obviously the initial numbers we talked, the chemo was really the only chance to get above 50% survival rate to 5 years with this level that I'm at. I'm at high risk level 3. Basically, there's a line between level 3 or stage 3 and stage 4. I am the line that's touching stage 4. And with this mucus type spreader in my blood, it was high risk that it's going to spread to a stage 4. I made that call. I think it's worth the risk. There are challenges that go with it. Obviously, if we have another experience of me with diarrhea and that type of residue, it would be immediate hard stop to the ER to start running additional tests so they can capture that. This DPYD test for the enzyme deficiency, they drew the blood prior to starting round 3 back on Tuesday, but it's 10 to 14 day turnaround, so it'll basically come back as this round is done. And I didn't want to delay in the event that it wasn't something that wouldn't prevent me continuing chemo, and I just need to manage the side effects better. If it is, or if I start to see the stool issue again, I will go to hard stop and be in the hospital until they can figure it out. Additionally, the other side effect of increased toxicity, which is these results that I've been getting, or side effects, is increased risk of heart muscle spasms and then heart attack. So we're managing that. I haven't had any that I know of. I'm low stress, even with the news. I don't imagine myself having a panic attack, but it would be like a similar to that. So we are, unfortunately, I am grounded from varying levels of fitness. I had to stop running because the damage in my feet from the betazyme toxicity, chemical burns he said I'm at borderline to continue chemo if I can't get my feet under control. So I can't run, which is one of my stress releasers, or my favorite anyway. So we're adapting my exercise, including supervision like a child, in case I need 911. The muscle spasms are a concern, but they also historically kind of come and go randomly. It's very difficult, but we are close to tripler. Obviously, I wear a watch that I monitor my heart rate on, so we'll be like even below green level for working out for me is like 130 to 150. Definitely don't want to get into the amber or the red. Probably more like 120 to 140, which is more like walking or a 10-minute per mile jog with somebody that can help me. So, yeah, that's super cool. And I'll have my phone on me, obviously, with all my records. Tripler's 10 minutes away, even without an ambulance, so if we don't need one. And they can hook me up to EKG pretty quick if necessary, and then start doing additional blood work. I'm not really particularly concerned about that because I haven't had any heart palpitations or anything like that. And we'll just keep praying that I can at least find a way through swimming, riding the bike, rowing, all things I can do with somebody that's not, I'm hopefully not inconveniencing to be in the gym with me. Just keep myself mentally sane and physically fit. I put on a couple pounds in spite of the diarrhea, and I don't want to, even though they encourage me that it's okay, considering. So that's really where we're at. We're trying to continue to monitor that. The results, if they come back in 10 days, would be 10 days from yesterday, which would be close to the end of this round. And that will be the next decision. Depending on the results of the test, I don't really understand how they consider the equation, but one of two, which is honestly a low probability. There's ways that they could consider based on my current health conditions and reactions. If they don't reoccur, I could like reduce dose chemo. 2 of 2 is no, chemo stops. There are no other alternatives for treatment outside of what may be considered like a homeopathic or non-standard, especially for this cancer that I have. So if I do have to stop, he was honest enough, and I appreciate his honesty, that there is no other options. And so my percentage of survival rate drops back down to flip of a coin. But to be honest, from the get-go, when I was diagnosed, I knew God was my only chance. And each subsequent test, analysis, and feedback, as I kept going into categories of the minuscule percentage of what this cancer is and who it affects, the fact that there's no clinical trials or the chemo was really just a shot in the dark, to be honest. I need to see how my body responds. The capabetazoline pills are really the biggest part of the treatment. I can't do oxaliplatin by itself. He said it was negligible results, and it's the combination of the two that basically become full fox. So going to full fox is not really an option either. It would have similar results, and although it's straight IV every 2 weeks, I would be putting myself at a risk category of basically having a heart attack before the cancer could have even killed me. So it is the toxicity level of obviously taking pills that say hazardous material and poisonous. It's true, and if your body can't handle it, it isn't your fault. It's just the way it is, and you got to give yourself grace and trust God that it's enough and that He's enough, because He is. The oncologist, you can tell by the way the way some doctors that their poker face ain't that great. But he was encouraging. He did say that he's praying for me and all of his patients, because there is a tendency in the medical field and community to overtreat cancer patients, especially with chemotherapy. This one, since they know so little about it because there's so few that have it, that survive, that they can't really do any tests that provide any significant data and science behind it. And he said he was just praying that the surgery was enough. And there's a chance it may have been, and this chemo would have been kind of over treatment. But to be honest, with a mucus spreader like this that can spread in your blood, in an organ, and on top of an organ, and in the peritoneal cavity. The chemotherapy is something that I think probably would be preferred, just to kind of rule it out. But we will definitely not make decisions uninformed and without prayer, first and foremost. The other thing that we were able to do Thursday, especially because of all of my stomach problems, was able to sit down with a dietitian at the hospital as well. Gave me some great advice that I thought I was going to get an email, but I didn't get it, with all the data and research that she had done specifically for cancer and chemo patients, which was very helpful and news to me on how I need to modify my diet, with specific advice on certain symptoms. GI cancer specifically, you got to be really careful what you're doing and what you're putting in your body. Prebiotics, probiotics, and I'll go in that deeper once I get all the information and research that she did. I think it's going to be helpful. It's going to be deliberate even more so in the meal planning, especially with nausea. But the balance of what types of foods, how you need to deliver to them over small meals will help with obviously pressure buildup that I've been experiencing, gas, missing part of my digestive tract, managing that, the proper amount of fats to ensure that the bacteria that are naturally in my stomach are getting what they need to activate. Same with when it comes to pre and probiotics, feeding those so they can do their work. And then they've also got to work overtime with this, with the fact that, I mean, they're also trying to process a toxic chemical in the body with the chemotherapy over 14 days. And this is only round 3. If I'm going to fruition of the level of risk and how many rounds I need to do for this cancer, which is 8, it's going to be critical to get my diet straight. And her basic recommendation was, nausea is probably going to continue to get worse. We're going to make a list of all the basic food groups and start a dry erase board and running tally of things that my body tolerates, because everybody's different. It's different for each round. So just like with my chicken soup or broth, it's kind of my go-to when I can't get anything else down. Adding chia seeds, oatmeal, making my protein smoothies with the fruit more of a well-balanced meal, because it's the only thing I can get down. And I may end up going to shakes only at some point if it, like, just regular food is, in the first week it's hard to chew anyway, but it can't be cold, it's going to be hot. It's just a really weird balance of getting that stuff in me. The other caution that she gave, and there's another really good website, which I also failed to write down and lost the paper, but she will send an email. Beware of advice of what you're getting from vendors, but also other people. With the GI cancer specifically, you got to be really careful and deliberate about how you introduce new things. And not that homeopathic or natural medicines don't work. I don't know. But trust me, if you're putting something in your mouth that's going to go into your stomach, you're running the risk of creating more problems with nausea. Not that it would necessarily interfere with the treatments and the chemotherapies, but unless you're a fan of vomiting and diarrhea, do so sparingly, do it deliberately, where you're doing one thing at a time that's third party verified, FDA approved, and has been certified by somebody other than the individual that's trying to sell it to you. Now, I'm not saying they're doing it with malicious intent. It may have worked for somebody, but specifically with GI cancers, a lot of those things that homeopathic or other things depend on the ability to have a healthy GI system and digestive tract to process all those things. And you're already putting weight on it with the cancer itself, the chemotherapy that you need. Like me with the supplements, I may have to go through and line out and start pulling those off. They had worked before as far as providing energy, helping protect my immune system, but they're maybe not valid, useful, and or I can do it with a multivitamin that's less harsh on my stomach, omega-3s to help protect my heart and with the increased risk, I may not need all those things, and they may need to go away and save me some money. So, sweet. Same goes for those other treatments, and I don't fault anybody because I've had people come up and make recommendations. I'm happy to hear it, and there are things that we are looking at, especially if it goes into this. If I am enzyme deficient or mutated and can't do chemo, um, there wasn't too many options in the medical community and science had to begin with the cancer this rare. At that point, there are no medical and science. It's protect your life and live as long as you can. If I am enzyme deficient and have to stop chemo early and don't even get through a fourth round, it comes to making deliberate decisions on how you want to choose to fight in a controlled fashion that can protect your quality of life. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of time to help treat plus improve quality of life, trying to revamp off of surgeries and chemo, get healthy as you can in the reduced time that you're now going to have to live. And that's an individual choice for anybody out there. Obviously, seek advice, both medical, praying about it, whoever your mentors are, and obviously including your spouse and kids in that decision, because if you only have 5 years or less, there's only so much you can do. And sometimes you just got to trust God. Actually, not sometimes, all the time. This is just going very apparent that as the options decrease, the only line that I've got left and ever really had was God. Not only to heal this, but if healing is not His will, living my faith out in a way that I die with dignity and faith all the way to the end as a witness for Him to bring Him glory. Which ultimately, this is win-win. It's just a matter of trusting God, taking steps daily, every minute to get to the next, see how your body reacts. What do we have to rule out? What's scientifically and medically not possible? And trust God through the process of this. This may be leading us down to a reduced option format that we have to be realistic about and trust Him regardless. The other couple things that I have started looking at specifically because of the the new level of risk that we've gone into. But I can't give advice to anybody on when's the right time. In the military, we always, especially with deployments and other things, and this just happened to have coincidentally or providentially a deployment as part of the process. So I'd already started looking at advanced medical directives and wills, which I've always had and had to refresh for this because it was kind of out of date. So review those things. I highly recommend it. I am, now that we have entered into this level of likelihood, although I had already had a will, updated it for this specifically right before deploying. The limitations of time are limiting where we had specifically where I chose to be buried. So that is changing. And then being very deliberate after talking to Amber about how I want my memorial service to be and planning that out now, talking with her and the girls, where we want it to be, what I want it to be, who I want to be involved if they're willing to do it. That way it's just less stress for her later. She's a rock, obviously, but she expressed specifically that it would be helpful if I planned that out. So I knew it was not only done in the way I would like it to be intended as both an example and celebration of life and faith, but recognizing military service, military honors, and just doing that process for her. So it's not a game of figuring out what needs to be done with a casualty assistance officer or any other thing. It's already done. The other thing that I thought was helpful, a friend of mine, and a lot of folks have reached out and So that the YouTube videos or my Facebook post or Instagram have been encouraging, and a friend recommended that actually just talk about what my hope is and basically talk through my testimony, which don't have time to do that today. And I thought it was a great idea, but I want to be deliberate about it. So it's delivered in the best method possible, pray about it, and try to condense it in a digestible presentation that's easy for folks to follow, that not discovers like where we're at in this cancer journey and what my faith has done and what Christ has done. But it goes a lot further back, thankfully, to give me the strength and the grit to rely on Christ alone. And I wanted to close with a couple of practical things. I call it prudent planning in the military. And that's really where the will and memorial service, specifically, although I've handled all the investments in our family, there are things that I had planned of, if I had lived, what I was going to be doing with those things, how to set up a trust for Amber and the girls to protect the funds that we've saved and invested to build income producing effects for Amber as I pass and we lose my income and she has to rely on reduced retirement benefits and all those things, and making sure all those things are straight. I think it's a hard discussion to have, especially given the circumstances, but it's something I've always planned against, especially with all the deployments I've been on, from lieutenant all the way through lieutenant colonel. So in the military, we deal with it a little easier, a little more deliberately, although I would also say that although I am a high risk taker and kind of flippant when it comes to like personal readiness reviews and doing that for a deployment, I see the utility in being more detailed in those planning to help take some of the weight off your spouse and loved ones. And it also gives you a peace of mind knowing that they don't have to worry about it, and your memorial service, whatever it ends up being, you gave your input for whatever level you wanted. You're going to be buried at the place of your choosing, and that your finances are protected to provide for your family and build a trust for your kids, if you have them, your grandkids in the future, and that it's protected from the unfortunate nature of predators that are out there that may play on their ignorance or naivety or emotions and try to potentially exploit to get money from them, because you won't be there to help educate and protect that going through. We're quickly learning that it's like, I haven't done all these things, like specifically one-on-one teaching them. They obviously, depending on age, aren't even ready for that emotionally. This is hard for them to have those discussions. It may be a YouTube video that they don't watch until later. It may be a series of notes, and it'll be a detailed will that describes the why behind it. And the executor of the will may or may not be Amber, to help preclude any pressure that she may feel of ensuring that these are my wishes. I am taking input and praying about it, talking to mentors, talking to them and Amber, but I'm making decisions based on a different level of maturity, financial understanding, prayer, faith, and what I decide will be executed, even if it may not be exactly at a level that they can understand. So we are looking, obviously exploring those options and practically planning for the impractical emotional overload of me dying earlier than obviously I had planned. There's two verses I wanted to share today, and these are one from a calendar a friend sent, which is from today, and then from my scripture reading today, just something I found encouraging. My faith and hope in Jesus Christ has been a journey of faith, the prodigal to probably one of the worst people in this world, and some of the things I've done overseas, considering those. and just the lifestyle I chose to live before coming back to Christ in 2010. And my goal, especially in the testimony, you may hear some things you didn't know about me. Obviously, I'll do it in a way that's privacy and all right. Apologize. Looks like we had some internet connection and I had to run to the room. All right. I didn't know where you dropped, but where I dropped, I was talking about what I found encouraging in my Bible reading today and a couple of things that I went through. One in the hospital yesterday, I found encouraging and just something that I think I'll bring more out as I talk in my testimony of some other examples from folks that have walked a similar journey with respect to how they've grown in their faith, especially from the perspective of someone that either has had no faith, an atheist, has been hurt in a way that makes them not want to believe in a loving God, and just how you deal from a very logical, Socratic society that trusts logic over anything, and how you can walk through a journey of discovery of your own faith and how it is compatible, in fact, is the most logical thing that you'll ever do. A verse that I mentioned off the calendar today in a couple of sentences. I can't remember which one this one is. Charles Stanley. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Psalm, that's bad. 121:3. The Lord is a personal God, not limited by time or space, one who inhabits the hearts of all who believe in him. That's one of the things that, as I look at time, how much time I have left, we're still trying to find answers. And God obviously only knows from the beginning of time. He knew how many days that we would have. It's a matter truly of choosing your attitude. And as we get closer to this and we are running out of options, the more we rule out, the more comfortable and at peace I am, because I knew from the beginning in my own heart, although I did not necessarily express it outside of a couple people, that what I had was probably going to be the worst. And it was just a feeling I had, and I had prayed about it. I have felt things inside of my body in places that weren't alarming, like, hey, I need to go to the ER. There wasn't anything anybody could do about it. And it felt like the cancer was spreading as we were doing these tests and waiting for surgery and trying to rule things out, going to MD Anderson. And you still hold out hope and you pray. But I felt like God was going to take me on a journey of losing every option other than him. And not because I didn't believe or I knew he was my option as the great healer and really my only option for this life and eternity. But I felt that it's going to be used as a testimony. It would bring him glory, whether I live or die. And I think that's where we're at. And still hoping and praying I don't have an enzyme imbalance. I can continue the chemo, although I know that's going to be just as hard, if not harder, of stopping, at least in the short term. And the odds really don't matter, especially with a cancer like this, because the odds, a bogus population anyway. A couple of things I'll bring into my testimony. It's going to take a little bit more research. If you haven't read it already, especially if you're a non-believer or atheist, there's both a movie, but I recommend the book, The Case for Christ. There's also a study guide that goes with it. If you are interested, I will go through it with you, or at least give you my input on it on a one-on-one basis. Other encouraging devotions. I mean, honestly, just pick one. The priority is being in the Word, not necessarily a devotion, but they do assist. My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. One that's very good for cancer patients, if you are one or know of one. How God Uses Sickness. It was written by a Calvary Chapel pastor, Ron Hint, who went through not only the challenge of cancer, He was diagnosed with a pretty rare cancer, and it was something to do with his back. When he had surgery, they found it because he had decaying, like early onset decaying disc disorder or something like that. But he lost his father unexpectedly one Saturday morning, and within 4 hours, he was called by the doctors recently after that surgery and found out that he had a cancer in the same day. It was a pretty hard journey for him. Obviously, he was a pastor and a leader at the time too, and it'll slow you down. He's dealt with the loss of a spouse, and I have to go back and do the research, but I think he mentioned that she also passed from cancer, and he is now remarried with a blended family, and he is cancer-free and still ministering. And I think a lot of, like he states in here, there's plenty of examples of why God brings believers through sickness as part of a witness to both those of faith and those that do not have faith, to be a light for Christ. But for us, it's also a way to grow deeper in our faith, and God will always bring good out of it, regardless of the pain and suffering that we go through, and allowing us to minister to others with whatever time we have, because you can't know the level of empathy of somebody that's suffering in a valley of cancer until you've walked it yourself. And the encouragement of folks like him and others that have gotten out of this valley, even those that have journeyed, like I mentioned, that one cancer survivor, or she wasn't a cancer survivor, sorry, breaking into beautiful. She did not survive, but she chose to fight through some horrific odds, some really painful surgeries. And although they only gave her 6 months to a year to live, she ended up living 7. And that, to me, is also a testament of faith. When you can die and know you're dying, and it's going to be painful, and you still cling to God, and you still find hope and joy and peace in the moment, and you're able to share that with others. The other thing I found very encouraging, and it was actually in my Old Testament reading from Isaiah, 7 centuries before Christ was born, and it shows, kind of demonstrates God's provision, providence, and his omniscience, because he worked through these prophets to really point towards Christ and what the Messiah was going to do. And it was the commission that Christ had. And if you've ever been commissioned for a mission, you know, you're there to follow through. There is no, it's either do it or die trying. And he did it, and he died as a result and was resurrected. In verse 1 and 2 of Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it, the day of God's anger against their enemies. To all who mourn in Israel, this is verse 3, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praises instead of despair. In their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his own glory. And that's what my hope and prayer for those of us that we go through challenges, whether we die in them or not, that we can become a great oak and representation of Christ, that he has planted in this world in examples as we pass to the next of his glory. That piece of scripture is tied to Luke 4, 17 to 21, which is awesome. And it speaks to not only Christ's commission, but his boldness in his mission, declaring himself God and the Messiah, and standing against the corruption of the Pharisees and the religious leaders at the time. 17 to 21 out of Luke 4. The scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where this was written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. He rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. All eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. Then he began to speak to them. The scripture you have just heard has been fulfilled this very day. And for those that think, especially non-believers, that Christ was not bold or he was passive, that is one of the bravest, boldest things and statements you can make. And he's the only one that could make it. That he was a Messiah. He was the perfect Lamb. And he endured all that came after that, all the way through the cross and his resurrection for me and for you. And that is where I find my foundation and boldness to take extreme risk with medical advice and supervision. And because I know if it doesn't work out, whether I collapse and have a heart attack or not, I know where I'm going. But I'm trying to fight for as much time as I can with Amber and the girls and give them the grace and space they need to deal with this from their perspective and their level of faith and being young ladies and the emotions that it has. And I'm still dealing with emotions, sometimes well, sometimes not. Sat in here watching music videos this morning, crying like a little kid. But it wasn't crying in a way of like despair. It was like these Christian artists in the video that I had posted on Facebook is so encouraging to see other people's faith and to see a man going through obviously a different disease, but it took his life. And to see the joy as he talked to Matthew West in that video was just, that's where I need to be. That's where I need to be every day and all the way until I'm done. So keep running the race, whatever your race is. We all struggle and find ways to encourage others. As much as I like being active and doing things, maybe that was a distraction for me for my divine appointments in my own family, and also in those around us. Sharing faith and encouraging others, because you don't really know what battle they're fighting, but this is a world that is broken and lost. Every day is a spiritual battle for everybody, whether they believe it or not. And we need to be the hope and light for those. And in doing so, you're being the hope and light, and you hear those words come out of your own mouth that reaffirm the scripture you're reading, the prayers that you're doing. And for fellow believers, they'll reaffirm that and pray for you and encourage you and put steel in your bones, because we all need it as we stand on Christ as a foundation. So I don't know when the next episode is going to be, because I never know how my side effects and my emotions are. And I want to be deliberate in doing so, but and respectful. I plan on talking through my testimony. So if there's, as I post it and try to figure out how to do the timing, if there's people specifically that you know that are reluctant to go to church, reluctant to trust God, they may find some comfort or understanding in it, and hopefully Christ and the Holy Spirit will use it as a way of showing them that there's some people that have been probably more evil than they have ever been in their lives, as much as they think they are, and that he can save me, and he was willing to. He wants to save everybody, but it is our choice. And I hope that not only for the non-believer, it's a choice they need to make, but for believers, we got to get off the fence, off the bench, and try finding ways that we can be the hands and feet of Jesus, hopefully turn this country around and be a witness that brings glory to him, just like this nation used to do in the past. So God bless. I'll post it on Facebook to hopefully give more warning than to this day. And either way, it'll be posted, and you can share, do whatever you want with it. Watch, don't watch. God bless you guys. Love you.